The Panasonic G7. This little beast of a camera was released and praised in 2015, 3 years ago. Does it hold up in 2018? Is it still the best 4K camera on a $500 budget? Let's find out. The G7 is a micro four thirds sensor size camera. It's not the largest sensor out there, but it's not the smallest either. Usually the bigger your sensor size, the better the low light performance and better image quality when it comes to dynamic range, especially for photos. Video quality is another story, especially when you consider the Micro Four Thirds Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K probably has the best video quality under $2,000, rivaling all the full frame cameras that have just released. The pros of this sensor size is the small, lightweight camera body, although in 2018 larger APS-C and full-frame sensor size cameras have small camera bodies as well, but the lenses for Micro Four Thirds are still smaller for their equivalent focal lengths for APS-C and full-frame. But you aren't limited to Micro Four Thirds lenses, as there are adapters for many different lens mounts, including APS-C and full-frame. Now getting into the specifics of the G7, the build quality reminds me of its price, as in the G7 feels cheap. The G7 has a plastic body, and my friend who is the owner of this camera has managed to nick the battery cover already with only a few weeks of usage. And even though it's a bigger camera than mine, surprisingly it doesn't feel much heavier than the Samsung NX500, which feels a little bit more premium. I especially don't like the loose feel of the aperture and shutter ring, especially this aperture ring, considering how I grip the camera. I've accidentally changed my aperture settings while filming, creating a harsh shift in lighting for my image. So this is something I had to adjust to, something I had to remember so I wouldn't repeat this issue. Now on one side of the camera there's a mic jack, but unfortunately no headphone jack to check your audio levels. Still, at this price point, off the top of my head, I can't think of any 4K camera that offers a headphone jack anyways. The placement of the SD card is at the bottom next to the battery, which isn't as convenient as having it placed on the side, and the battery cover is a little big, so if you have any tripod monopod release plate that is over 2 inches wide, you're going to have to unscrew the release plate every time you need to switch batteries during long filming sessions. On the plus side, the camera does have a nice, fairly deep grip for you to latch onto the camera. It has a decent EVF. It probably won't compare to new cameras released this year, but it's nice to have in bright sunlight. Also, a plus is the fully articulating touchscreen, a mini HDMI port that supports output up to 4K, a USB 2.0 port to transfer your files to your PC. Unfortunately, you can't charge the G7 using the USB cable, something I've gotten used to with my NX500 after a long day of filming. With a low battery, I can transfer my files while my camera charges. With Panasonic, I think only the G9 supports USB charging. There's also a remote port for a shutter release remote and a built-in flash. These are useful for taking pictures, but I'm focusing on video features, so I'm not going to get into that. Now, what I love about the Panasonic G7 are the 6 customizable function buttons on the body of the camera that you can set to specific camera features for you to quickly access. And there are an extra 5 function buttons on the touchscreen menu as well. For instance, I have the extended teleconverter feature set to the function F4 button. You get a nice zoomed in image that Panasonic says there is no loss in video quality. Unfortunately, this feature only works in 1080p on the G7, whereas Panasonic's high-end cameras like the GH5 has extended teleconverter support in 4K as well. Since I wasn't familiar with the Panasonic menu system, like many camera systems, I had to familiarize myself with the layout, but it was fairly easy to learn after practicing a few hours. Features that I wanted to find were placed in logical locations in the menu system, and using either the physical buttons or the touchscreen made it a breeze to navigate. I also installed and tested the Panasonic Image app on my Android phone, and it works great. You can view what you're filming on your phone, and you have options to control your camera settings like the shutter speed, aperture, ISO, and of course, turning recording on and off. There's a slight lag from what your camera is recording and what you see on the phone, but it's still a cheaper alternative to a dedicated external monitor. I also tested Wi-Fi connection from the G7 to my desktop for file transfers, but this option is slow. especially if you're trying to transfer large video files, so I'd stick to using the USB cable over this. Now, despite all these cool camera features, it won't matter if the image quality sucks. And here's some 4K footage of the Panasonic G7 using the 14 to 42mm kit lens. At this price point, this 4K quality is a damn bargain. It looks nice. If you want to get some decent bokeh with this kit lens, you're gonna have to film at 42mm, get relatively close to your subject, and make sure your background is a distance away, and you can get a pleasing image. Low light performance, as mentioned before, isn't the best. Although up to ISO 1600, it seems usable with some denoising, but I probably wouldn't go past 800 ISO if I didn't have to. It's better to invest in lighting or get a better lens with a higher aperture. The Panasonic G7 can film at UHD 4K at 24 and 30 frames per second at 100 megabits per second and 1080p at 60, 30, and 24 frames per second, all at 30 minutes durations. Like I mentioned before though, the mini HDMI port does output up to 4K, so you can bypass the 30-minute recording limit by externally recording using, say, an Atmos Ninja 5 or another external recorder. Okay, let's pause for a minute. I didn't realize until editing my G7 review that there is a workaround to get unlimited recording on the G7 in 4K. Doesn't seem to work in 1080p according to the comments in this Sun Pixel video tutorial I'm showing you right now. I also returned my friend's G7 already, so I couldn't test this out, but I felt it only fair to share this info now that I'm aware of it. Anyways, back to my review. I've only tested out external recording to my capture card, and in order to have a clean image without the menu system being displayed, I had to navigate to the TV connection menu and turn off the HDMI info display. I really like that the G7 has many different color profiles to choose from, and while there isn't support for a flat log profile, you do have some nice options like Cinelight D and V, as well as the ability to create a custom color profile. Filming behind the camera, the G7 is a joy to use, but what if you're vlogging?
So here I am vlogging with the Rode Go mic using the little tripod that comes with this kit, using autofocus. Not sure if it's focusing on me, hope it is, but it's a good test to show how the autofocus works with this Panasonic G7. I probably wouldn't use it though. But all those cameras, okay, yeah, this thing definitely is not focused on me. That is focused on the background. And this is really harsh, horrible lighting. I don't know if I've said this already in the video, I probably have, because if I'm doing a thorough review, I better have said this already. But this camera, because its default lowest ISO setting is 200, I would definitely get an ND filter for this thing, because even though I'm trying to test and show you how this camera should look, I am putting a shutter speed that you should not be using when vlogging. I have my shutter speed up pretty damn high, so you're probably going to see some weird movements, but if I put it to this correct shutter speed at the lowest ISO it can go, which is 200, and right now I want to keep my f-stop at 3.5. If I want to keep that, then it's going to be totally overexposed. I can see my zebras right now on this camera going crazy, and you're probably seeing a very bright mess. Okay, I have this set on continuous autofocus. My zebras are still going crazy, and continue autofocus, just like single autofocus on this camera, you can't trust it. I can tell my face is out of focus right now. Okay, so now I have this locked down to a manual autofocus, and this is how I would vlog on this camera. Yes, Panasonic does put in autofocus updates for their cameras, but for their top of the line cameras like the GH5 and the GH5S and the Panasonic G9, all of those just got an update couple days ago. This Panasonic G7 hasn't gotten a software update since 2016. So definitely this G7 isn't going to get any more support from Panasonic. So the autofocus that is currently in it, you're stuck with it. And I just wouldn't trust it for vlogging. And that's why here I'm using this manual focus, and I think just trying to keep your hand steady, keep the distance where your camera is away from yourself or whichever subject you're focusing on would just work best. And I mean, there are vloggers out there, for instance Cody Warner, he has a Panasonic GH5 and all of his lenses that he uses are manual lenses, so he has no autofocus, and yet he manages to pump out vlogs every day, and for the most part he has his face is in focus. To end off, again, I wouldn't trust the autofocus with this. I would definitely, if you're going to use this camera for vlogging, I would learn how to focus manually. And my wife has just snuck up on me. Okay, so there's two things I forgot to check yesterday, and so I'm trying to get it done this morning, and the sun is out crazy hot right now this morning. One is filming in 1080p, because I noticed when I was filming in 4K, just like with my Samsung NX500, when you're shooting in 4K and you're moving around, you do see that bouncing, you do see a little bit of that rolling shutter. The second thing I forgot to check out yesterday, because I was using the autofocus using the 69 area points, now I am using the face detection autofocus. I can see it marked by where my eyes should be, and I see it scanning my face. Honestly, the face tracking looks like it's been keeping me in focus. Again, I still advise, besides using the face autofocus for the G7, learn how to focus manually as well, just in case, because right now it's the ideal weather right now. You got that bright sunlight. I don't know how this will hold up like in the evening time, like I was shooting yesterday in 4K. If you're primarily vlogging, again, this may not be the best camera. You might want to look at spending a bit more on the Canon M50 to get that dual pixel autofocus. Of course, but that's with filming in 1080p, because you lose that dual pixel autofocus while filming in 4K. Although overall, I still think that you'd get more bang for your buck with this camera. The only other thing I have to get used to is with my Samsung NX500, my flip screen goes straight up. It tilts straight up above the lens, so my eyes stay focused on the lens. That to me looks more appropriate. But what I have to practice is staying looking at the lens. With this G7, the screen is over here, so my eyes are naturally looking over this side where the screen is, but it looks a little unnatural because I'm here trying to talk to you, my audience, so I should be looking directly at the lens. Something to think about when vlogging. Anyways, back inside. So here I'm doing a UHD 4K comparison between the Samsung NX500 and the Panasonic G7. Not really comparing image quality, although I do have the face tracking autofocus on for the Panasonic, just to see how it handles a low light situation indoors. But the main thing I really want you to take away from this, the Samsung NX500 field of view is about the same 2.5 times crop factor that you would get shooting in 4K with the Canon M50. So if you notice, shooting at that UHD setting, you would definitely get a wider field of view shooting in 4K on the Panasonic G7. But switch things over to 1080p and you can see the size difference of the APS-C size camera with the Samsung NX500 and with the Canon M50 versus the 2 times crop factor of the Panasonic G7. So yeah, you'll definitely get a wider field of view using the Canon M50, shooting in 1080p, and you'll also get that dual pixel autofocus. Not sure how this is holding up indoors. It looks like it's losing focus. I'm just moving my head and it seems to be losing focus. So yeah, definitely would use manual focus inside.
So to reiterate some points, get an ND filter if you're filming in bright sunlight, invest in some lights if you're filming indoors or in low light. Autofocus is decent with good lighting, but learn to manually focus. If you are primarily vlogging and you need great autofocus, look at the Canon M50, although you get more bang for your buck with the G7. But if you need great image stabilization while vlogging, and that's more important to you than autofocus, then the Panasonic G85 is a camera you should consider. In conclusion, at this price point, this is definitely the best 4K camera at a $500 budget. In fact, the only other competition at this price range is Panasonic. If you don't need a US 1-year warranty, you can even get the international version for a mere $412, which is a steal. If you want a nice starter kit with a camera bag, a Rode Mic Go, 32GB SD card, a mini tripod, and an extra battery, Amazon has a nice kit for $600. The tripod on this kit sucks. The ball head mount can't support the weight of the Panasonic G7, and with minimal use from my friend, with him moving around using the camera bag, I do see some loose treading already. So I can't guarantee how long it'll last, but the Rode mic and the SD card and extra battery make it worth the price. And this bundle does give you the 1-year warranty as well. This is a nice camera you can grow with. A small initial investment, but you can always get nicer lenses for better image quality, a gimbal for image stabilization, and an external monitor to bypass the recording limit. Lots of options to complement this G7. If you like this review and if you're interested in buying the Panasonic G7, there are Amazon affiliate links to the 1-year warranty version, international version, and the Rode mic bundle in the video description. No additional cost to you, but I do get a small commission that helps me out in providing more content on this channel. Anyways guys, if you like this video, please smash that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. Let me know what are your thoughts on the Panasonic G7, and I'll see you guys soon. I'm a little busy on non-YouTube projects, working hard for that new camera money, but I have a lot more content to come. See ya.